It's a pleasure to be with you today, coming all the way from West Texas, where we've just moved. We don't have snowstorms in West Texas, we have sandstorms. So I'll take the snow for a bit. I was so privileged to be following these two gentlemen in their speeches. If I could have had 90 minutes instead of 45, I basically would have said exactly what they said, because it provides all the underpinnings of why we're doing all that we're doing. So I'm tremendously pleased to be able to be in a partnership with them today and thinking about education, especially this question of governance. I think that was really the theme that we saw all the way through and certainly the question that we're asking today is, who governs education? It comes down to governance under God, and then following our natural responsibilities before God to govern the formation of souls within our families. That's what we're going to talk about today. Except that I'm going to push you and prod you a little further, because I'm going to insist that this question of governance and self-governance is not limited to the moment that your child turns 17 or 18. So we're going to push that question, that barrier, one step further. I heard in the first presentation this emotion, this feeling that we all had in 1980, 1979, 1980, 81 of, can we really do Christian education? Is that possible? Can we really homeschool? Is that even, well, it's not legal, we know that, but can we responsibly homeschool our own children? And I would say what my thesis for the day is that the feelings that you're about to feel as I try to extend governance past this interesting artificial thing called senior in high school, that the same feelings that we felt in 1980, you're going to feel today, because we have certain muscles that we've learned to activate in the K-12 side, but there are other muscles that we simply don't know how to activate anymore. And there's atrophy that's happened in soul formation within the community of faith, and we're trying to re-stimulate some of these atrophied muscles, and most of us don't know how to move the leg, right? So you're going to feel this pressure, and it's a pressure that we all feel. But I hope that we can engage in this together. So a little bit of, by way of biography, in many ways everything is biography, who you are, where you come from. My mom is a Southern Alberta, Three Hills, Alberta, Montana, Mennonite farm girl. They farm both sides of the border. And Hutterite on my grandfather's side, Mennonite on my grandmother's side. So they both run off together and both got kicked out. Some of you who know some of those contexts, it's probably funnier than for other people. But that gave us a deep and abiding love for multi-generational, localized formation. There's something to be said about having a preacher continuously from 1580 in the family. Long-term, multi-generational. You're going to make me cry. Faithfulness. And if there's one thing that we seem to have forgotten in this culture, is that somehow you can transmit the faith from generation to generation. And why have we lost confidence in the ability to govern and form souls from generation to generation? And I don't care what you call it, preschool, K-12, high school, college, those are irrelevant. And so that in many ways is a key formational component of who we are as a family. But if you're a Montana Mennonite or Alberta Mennonite farm girl, you either farm or you go on the mission field, right? And so my mom went to Prairie Bible Institute, then down to Grace College of the Bible, met my dad, who's a Nebraska farm boy, Bible church farm boy. They ended up at Dallas Seminary, and then in 1992, we moved to Brazil. And so the other component of who I am is a family that's dedicated its life to working across multiple communities and building and planting centers of formation within the Christian intellectual tradition. And they've been there 30 years. They're still there, running our Brazilian operations. I then left Brazil in 2001, studied classics and linguistics in the States. My wife made the unfortunate, at the time girlfriend, made the unfortunate decision to run off to Africa and not marry me. So then I had an abundance of time, so I went to Germany, did my German and theological studies, Jerusalem for my Hebrew studies and Dead Sea Scrolls. Actually came back here to Langley for a year. I was Canada Research Chair in Dead Sea Scrolls at Trinity Western. And then Laura came back, we were married and moved to Oxford, where I did my another master's and PhD in Christian origins, classics. And it was there that I began to really think about this question of how do we extend back governance into the post-secondary space, primarily thinking about Brazil. We'd started a publishing house in Brazil. We began to license most of the curricula that you might know, Apologia Press, Canon Press, Classical Press, all these various different curricula, translated that into Brazil, and began to plant classical and Christian schools and homeschool co-ops across Brazil. We have about 450 of those now. But we ran into the wood chipper of the Marxist, antithetical, dialectical framework of higher education that really has run Brazilian universities since the post-war. And begin to think about how do we solve that problem now that we have tens of thousands of students coming into a Christian education environment in K-12, but then getting just utterly destroyed the moment that they step into a secularist Marxist context in the university space. So that was the formational framework from which I came, both biographically, deep, deep value and longing for human formation and flourishing at the local community of faith, from our family's perspective. The missional context of looking at all of these different communities, affinity groups, geographical differences, ethnic differences in all of these different communities, and recognizing very quickly that we could not govern those spaces. We, our mission, our ministry, certainly not the state, which means that we had to return governance and stimulate self-governance back to those local communities of faith if they were going to truly form the souls of their children, their families, for a true gospel-centered, kingdom-centered, flourishing community. And then you insert the academic component of that within Oxford. And it was at Oxford that I ran into some of the old ways that we've talked about. Oxford is it's a holdover from a medieval educational system in which, of course, everybody at the University of Oxford is getting a degree from the University of Oxford, right? But they're placed in these little cloistered colleges and halls, which, as an American, I had no idea. As Canadians, maybe you guys are more familiar with the Oxford system. I was totally unfamiliar with the system. I remember very clearly going in the first day, we moved to Oxford. My wife had our firstborn son. He was 6 weeks in a little 400 square foot flat. And she kindly looked at me and said, maybe you should go to town for a couple hours. So I left my flat and started to walk down into Oxford, down Banbury Road. And I began to look for the University of Oxford. 2 hours later, I had not found the University of Oxford. There is no college campus. And so there was this old lady walking down the street, and I asked, could you tell me where the University of Oxford is? And she looked at me and she said, are you American? I said, yes. She said, what are you studying? Like, theology, are you evangelical? Yes. I would bet you at Wycliffe Hall. And Wycliffe Hall is basically the aggregation of all the tutors, evangelical Anglican tutors, who are preparing their students to take the Oxford exam. So there's these 47 constituent colleges and permanent halls across Oxford, which are really made up of the specialists that are tutoring the students as they prepare for the Oxford exam. There's nothing like this in at least the US. Like, this is a totally foreign concept that I kind of walked into. But I immediately began to see that there were fascinating formational opportunities that were taking place in Oxford that I had not had in my either Brazilian or North American higher education contexts. There's all sorts of very interesting social registers that happen. Wycliffe has no endowment, has no money. It's a graduate theological seminary, whereas Christ Church or St. John's has $30 billion of endowment, and all the soon-to-be premiers go to those colleges. That's where the tutorials take place. There's only 3 professors of theology, professors at the university, Marcus Bachmiel being one of them, who's my professor, Dean Ireland, professor of theology, but he's also the tutor of theology at Keble College. So the professors are there to kind of create quality control and set the exams and whatever, but it was meeting at Keble, meeting at the Kilns and C.S. Lewis's old offices, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, discussion, peer review, writing papers, tearing into each other before you ever submit that work to the university. Just an entirely different context of formation. And not just looking at content. We're in this fascinating moment now where we have more content, more data, more access to data than any time in the history of the world. And we're the least wise generation that's ever existed. So somehow, content does not necessarily equal wisdom. And so how do you begin to bring these two things together? And it was in that tutorial context that I began to formulate what is now Christian Halls International, which is this partnership between various different faith-based confessional universities who had gone off and tried to build all this online content, tried to move online and doing all these degrees, only to find that the outcomes of wisdom were just utterly destroyed. And so these universities basically allowed us to license all of their degree programs and for us to go back to Brazil and begin to build up these pocket micro-campuses, these tutorial groups, tapping into the divine wisdom and eldership that God has given these communities. I was talking with Bruce earlier today that the great lost treasure that we have today is our grandparents. Because the state, in its attempt at being father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, and God, its greatest competition is our grandparents. And it's no wonder they want to kill them. So it's our mission. At CHI, we're here, and I'll say this at the outset, this is the model that we've developed. This is not here to colonize you. You don't all have to become CHI campuses. This is just a model that you can look at and compare and say, how could this potentially be utilized within the Canadian context, which is a very diverse, geographically, ethnic, cultural space. And so we designed this for a missional context where there's very, very large geographical dispersion and also extremely diverse ethnic communities. And how do we return governance of post-secondary education to these communities? That's why we built this. And so our mission is to build Christ-centered, tutorial-based education in this older Oxford-style model to strengthen local communities by offering Christ-centered, tutorial-based education that fosters intellectual, spiritual, and vocational formation. That's our mission. That's what we're out there doing. But that serves a larger vision, which is to return the task of human formation to local communities of faith. When we talk about education, that's kind of a modern word. What we're really talking is the forming of souls. In C.S. Lewis's language, we're forming eternal souls. We have the incredible privilege of taking of a parent to supernaturally form and make an eternal, lifelong soul and set that soul on a formational trajectory that will last forever. Forever. And God has bequeathed us the responsibility and the privilege of shaping that soul for eternity. So when we talk about education, we're not just talking about skill tooling. We're talking about soul formation. And so how do we take a hold of that responsibility and steward that responsibility within the community of faith, rather than abdicating that responsibility because we've been told you're not competent? You were competent maybe when they were 17. Maybe you were competent when they were 4. But as you move through the formational categories that we've been given, suddenly, certainly at 18, you're no longer competent to form this soul. We'll take this soul now. Well, it just happens to be that that soul is now ripe and ready for the fingerprints of its formers, and we give it back to the state. We give it back to a secular, godless context. And it's no wonder that these kids immediately evaporate. So the Christian Hall model, this is really the ecosystem that we work in. We now have 10 different universities that we've licensed, brokered all of their degree programs. We have 450 degrees from dual credit, bachelor's, master's, PhD, because we're basically leveraging on all of this work that they've done to go try to decentralize and disseminate education, but they just haven't done it very well. So we have all of these degree programs. We license the ability to offer a locally targeted tuition price point that is non-debt and does not require state funding. Because the moment that you insert state funding, you're trading your shackles for your shekels. And we've refused to engage in state-based shekels. What's been interesting is that many times our universities that we work with, they have accreditation, they have systems, they have processes. Sometimes their content is not really that good, actually. And so some professor built a PDF deck 15 years ago and is still using it as the basis for his coursework. And actually we're finding that there's really good content partners out there that we can start to work with. So on the supply chain, think of this as supply chain. We have our university degrees, we have our content creators, we have our publishers, and we need them to pivot from a position of governance, which by and large they have shown to be failures at stewarding and governing this space, and pivot into a support structure to support our local communities. And fortunately, many of our different universities have said, we'll give that a shot. So what that means is then my job is to go out and build, not just plant churches, which was our last life in Brazil, but rather to go plant centers of Christian formation across Brazil, East Africa, now here in North America. That requires both organizational competency in the hall director, but more than anything else, we have to find those Oxford-style tutors that are willing to sit and ask the right questions. And we'll dive into that here in a little bit, what that actually looks like. But this tutorial, that is the core program that we're building at Christian Halls International. What's been interesting is that in North America, anyways, we have this exploding space called the community college and trade schools, which our prestige universities have abdicated and abandoned. So in Dallas-Fort Worth, where we've been based, one town, one megapolis, there's 350,000 students at the 3 community colleges in Dallas-Fort Worth. 350,000. And there is no Christian presence in that space. This is like the Bible Belt center of like Christianese, right? This is Dallas-Fort Worth. No one is interested in touching that space because our Christian universities have gone prestige and elite, and they've left behind the largest growing population of education in North America. but it opens up a tremendous opportunity for us to say, we'll take them. Trade schools. Some guy walked into my house 3 years ago. It was 100 and infinity in Texas, and our AC went out. And so my wife is not happy, and so this guy walks in to fix my HVAC, my AC unit. And you know that feeling of some guy's gonna come over to my house, trades guy. Should I send my kids to the back bedroom? Is this gonna go well? Is this gonna be a good thing or a bad thing? And this guy walks in and spreads Jesus through my whole house. Just blows me away. Ministers to my wife, ministers to my kids, shares Christ, just covering my house with Christ. I say to him, brother, where would you go to get a Christian worldview, solid Christian formation, and study the trades? And he said, Dr. Ellis, we haven't had a faith-based trade school in the state of Texas since 1955. GI Bill came in, government money came in, subsidized all the white-collar stuff, and all of you Christian universities got out of the trades and followed the money. You know what that's called? That's called a sin. That's what it is. It's called sin. That the person who's going to be in houses and homes every single day, far more people than I will ever talk to in a month, he'll be ministering and spreading the gospel. We have abandoned the formation of that space, and it's a sin. So why do we build Christian Halls International? We built this as a coalition builder, a funding advocate, a champion. We're out there designing and saying, okay, who needs to really come into these spaces? How do we build and recapture governance of these spaces? And there's really 4 stakeholders that we work with. Certainly Christian Halls International. You know, we're there to advocate for these partnerships. We build it on the Oxford tutorial system. We train tutors how to engage in Socratic discussion, to sit down with students, to ask the tough questions. They don't need a lecture. We've got tons of content, got tons of data. They have to ask questions that are gonna stick, right? And then they have to let the students stew in their juices and just be quiet and let the students just bake for a little bit. That's a very, very different skill set than being trained to get up and just vomit data. It's called wisdom. It's called wisdom. It's called discipleship. And to train this kind of tutorial model, so we spend a lot of time identifying community by community, who are these people? It's been interesting since seeing the market. We began by designing this Christian community college and trade school space because the market is just enormous. And there's no presence here. And we're not competing against name brand universities. Not competing against Baylor down in Waco. Do you guys know Baylor University? You know, nobody from Waco goes to Baylor. It's $75,000 a year. Nobody from Waco can go to Baylor. They're all in McLennan Community College, knocking off their first couple years. Nobody wants a degree from McLennan Community College. They're just there trying to stay out of $200,000 to $300,000 of debt. That's why they're at McLennan Community College. So we can park alongside McLennan Community College and say, here are the elders of your community that love you. Here's the retired CEO of the large business that would love to disciple you in this MBA program. Here's the best English composition, philosophy, psychology tutor in your town that would love to sit with you once a week and ask the big questions and pull you out of the cesspool that is the psychology class over at the State University. And we can do that for $6,000 a year instead of $70,000 a year. Getting a fully accredited top-tier Christian university program because we're doing all the work, because we're doing all the governance. The moment you give over governance, guess what happens? Administrative costs skyrocket, implementation skyrocket. Suddenly you're driving your students into the chains of state-based subsidies. The abdication of governance is our problem and is our fault. What we're seeing at the state is just the result. You said it earlier, Bruce. The result of having abdicated governance in the formation of our souls. So we started with the Christian community college piece and, knock off 30 credit hours, knock off 45 credit. I don't even know if you guys do credit hours here. Who knows? But knock off your first year, knock off your first two years. Well, then we begin to see these specialists emerge from the community saying, well, if we could tutor our way through those first 10, 12 classes, why couldn't we launch our own teacher college? Do we not have the best educators? Do we not have a whole ecosystem in the Surrey space of the best Christian teachers in Canada? Why would we hand our kids off to secular teacher trainers when we have the best teachers in Canada? Because we walk with a limp and we forgot what it means to actually form souls. That's why. Because we've said, no, they're the specialists. It's the same exact thing 30 years ago with us saying, I don't know if we can teach our kindergartners. Isn't that some specialist's role? And the specialty is godly love. That's the specialty. It also happens to be one of the only things that the state is incapable of giving to our children. And so now we blew kind of the doors off the general ed stuff, the community college stuff, the trade school stuff, and now people begin to come to us and say, what about the conservatories? It's a very small percentage of every community that we go to, but every community that we go to, there's a population that loves the arts and loves ballet and loves music and loves visual arts and loves film. Where do they end up going? To SMU's music program. There is not a darker program in all of university than the music and theater space at SMU. And at my local homeschool co-op, I have 3 Juilliard-trained theater people that are saying, we're totally competent until this space, but they've graduated. And I know what's going to happen. We're going to send them across town to SMU, and they might not come back, not just a Christian, they might not come back the same gender. And we know what we're doing. We're sending them over, but we don't know how to flex that muscle. And so I had to go back to my universities and say, I need a BFA. I need a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I need a Master's of Fine Arts that we can deploy into this local formational space. And there is nothing that we should own more than the arts. It's just demonic. Just demonic. It's pagan, the old gods coming and taking their territory. That's what we're fighting. And so suddenly you start to recognize that all of human formation is God's. All sectors, all spheres. And he has given us everything that we need for godliness, for formation within the church. Everything that we need. We need better civic leaders. We need better campaign managers. We need people who can say, I love those special need kids. And it's already terrible. With government assistance in high school, what do you think is going to happen the moment that they graduate? You think they're going to have better support in the state system? Have any of you ever seen what happens in special needs programs in our universities? Guess who's the first person to show up when I show up in some small town and say we have a small group, tutorial-based, fully accredited education program with deep integration into the local business community? The first person to show up is the mom with the dyslexic kid that says, I never thought my kid could succeed. I'll do it. I'll be your director. I'll be your tutor. Whatever you need, right? Because she's ready to govern. It's my immigrant family in South Florida. Grandpa, grandma, oma, opa still in the house, owning their local business, saying, oh my gosh, we know what to do with this. Just give it to us. We know what to do. You know who can't, who has no idea what to do? My wealthy suburban white evangelical in Dallas who says, I couldn't possibly. We're talking about it's a question of spiritual and moral courage. To start to learn to twitch those muscles again. The problem is no longer access to programs. It's no longer accreditation. It's a question of spiritual and moral courage to govern the formation of souls. That's what we're talking about in every level of education, including higher education. Now I've got a problem because I can get up here at Christian Knowledge International and talk about this all day long. And I can go acquire universities and publishers and all this other kind of stuff. But I cannot go to every single community and do this work. So we had to start some groups, starting to work with Virtues Campus, Vishal Mangalawadi, Academic Rescue Mission in South Florida. We started Aspen to basically start to build networks of local, not church planters, but planters of centers of the Christian intellectual tradition. Training them how to go out and train those tutors, train those directors. So that's now beginning to scale. Universities, we now have dozens of universities, Protestant and Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I have absolutely no idea what to do when that 900-person Tridentine Mass conservative Catholic community from Plano shows up and says, please help us because we will never send our kids to that liberal, crazy Catholic university down the road. Will you work with us? Like, I'm not Catholic. They're like, we don't care. And so the opportunity is now to say, okay, great, let's look at great content. Let's work with great people. You know, what does this look like now? In North America, we've got about 1,100 of these contractors across Brazil. Brazil has just exploded. We've got over 10,000 students. But now in the States, in the last 2 years, these local micro-campuses are beginning to start up. We've got 40 currently active. We trained 50 new directors last month. Because COVID, honestly. Because COVID was like the hand of God coming down to smite the secular university industrial complex. And suddenly people begin to say, now not only can I not afford it financially, I cannot afford the wasteland that I see of what's happening to the souls of my kids. What can I do? How can I get involved? So this is now starting to sprout up. Everything from small places like the Wagon Box in northern Wyoming. Local businessman bought this 20-acre property and has this beautiful restaurant, and he took the back half of it and filled it full of great books, the classics. And he said, I'll take and I'll pay for. It's like, I have a human resource crisis. I don't have anybody that can work in my companies. I'll pay for 3 BAs in humanities to move to northern Wyoming, incubate with me, and basically have a little fellows program. That's not for everybody, but there's a couple people. There's a couple 18, 19-year-old young men that they would love this, and they do. And then for them to mentor and disciple all these high school kids around the region that can come in, dual credit, undergraduate, business programs, and turn this space into a human formational space. It's no longer a restaurant. It's a human formational space for soul formation. Right? M5 Enterprise came to us. They're a local family business. They own 15 small, it's called Golden Chick restaurants across Texas. They fried chicken. I was in a Bible study with the owner. We're talking about virtue formation and soul formation, and he said, that's all nice and good and well, but there's no virtue in chicken. We scrape the bottom of the barrel of human resources. Our entire organization has a turnover rate of 8 weeks. There's no virtue in chicken. And I said, try me. See what, I said, where's your worst store? He's like, my worst store is out in Colorado City. They try to differentiate. Colorado City, West Texas. He was about to shut down a store, 3 employees. They were doing $7,000 of top-line revenue. We designed a little dual credit human formational leadership institute within that chicken restaurant. The theory of taking C.S. Lewis's, it's not a barn, what do you call it in The Last Battle? That little shed that looks bigger on the inside than on the outside. Right? Went to all the homeschool kids, went to all the classical school kids in November. By March, we had 37 employees, all of them getting their college paid for. They did $27,000 of top-line revenue in November. Because this space suddenly became transformed into a space where you walk in and something is different about this place. And then the community began to come in. They started serving chicken at 10:30, but by 7:30, they're open for nickel coffee, Bible study, prayer, tutorials. Totally transforms this little town. We're now out in all 15 of those stores, and that business owner was so impressed, he bought an apartment complex in Waco and said, I need to, not just, the problem is not my chicken restaurants, the problem is me. The problem is our corporate structure, that we are out colonizing all of these little towns without any vision for how to form good people. So now he's bringing in apprentices into Waco. Well, at that Colorado City store, the young man and young woman who were the first tutorials in that community, as a reward for what they were doing, they were given that store. So now they own that store and now perpetuating this human formational vision. So it's not just about education. Education is a technical, secular idea of when you go to class. But then they want to talk about social benefits and, flourishing, but they don't actually know how to get there. What this is doing is it's actually taking, and the owner, the CEO of all of Golden Chick showed up at this store, went from the worst Golden Chick to the best Golden Chick in 6 months out of 900 Golden Chick stores. And he said, I need to know your secret sauce. What'd you do with the food costs? I was like, you are not going to like the answer, my friend. Has nothing to do with food costs. It's Christ's kingdom. It's forming souls. And it's watching Christ's kingdom overflow. That's how we impact our society. Do you think anyone in that town is going to let that Golden Chick shut down now? No one in that town is going to let that Golden Chick shut down. Right? Because we returned governance of soul formation to the community of faith. How do we start to build this? We've got 550 Association of Classical Christian Schools across North America that are asking us to build a 13th, 14th grade junior college humanities program on top of what they're already doing. Right? We have 6,000 homeschool co-ops across North America. You guys probably don't know Trail Life, but Christian Boy Scouts, right, who have come to us and said, we have all the people. We have the dads. We have the grandpas that are here discipling their kids. We win. You get the dads, you get the grandpas, you get them discipling their kids, we win. And now it's just a product question. Okay, what do we need to roll in? What classes, a trade school, whatever. It's a governance question. And I have, in every county of North America, a secular, godless, expensive, crap community college that is siphoning off talent and treasure with no way to send it back. And if we are not parked beside every one of these, it's because of spiritual and moral apathy. Right? The market's there. There's no question. We know exactly what classes they teach. We know exactly what courses are the top demand. We know everything that we need to know to go compete. And if we refuse to do it, God's judgment be upon us. There's no question what has to be done. There's no question that we've been given the moral, ethical, spiritual responsibility to do it. We just haven't wanted to go do it. Now, this is North America. That's not Brazil. Brazil's an entirely different map. And I don't know the Canadian map. But somebody's got to go figure out, who do we work with? What businesses? What homeschool co-ops? What trail life troops? And who do we go compete with to start? I don't have to compete against Waco or Baylor. I don't have to come in and try to be Lexus. I'll be Civic all day long for the next 20 years and eat the tail, and then in 20 years we'll eat the head. Okay. Do you know the only thing that kept me from doing that? Pride. I didn't want to get into the community college space. I'm a University of Oxford professor, by God. Pride. And to pivot from the privileged, upscale elite to pivot to this, where literally this dot is 350,000 kids. That dot. Do you think that 10% of those are godly, Christian, conservative kids that are just trying to stay out of debt? Absolutely. At least 10% of those kids in a 50-mile radius. That's 35,000 students that we have given to Satan. It's not acceptable. So how do we operationalize this at scale? We truly believe that God has prepared the allies, the partners, and the organizations ready to help this vision. It will require collaboration and not monopolization. This is not a game for me to come in and colonize with CHI. This is an opportunity for people to take back governance and say, we're going to do it. We're not going to leave. We're not going to abandon our space. This means that in Canada, you need to start thinking, who do we work with? When I was invited to be part of the, you'll have to help me with the acronym, Canadian Christian Education Movement, that's the M. I was going to say CCII, but CCIM. Here's these partners that are all looking at this space. Who do we start to work with? Where is that mama bear, homeschool mom that has organized for the last 15 years and knows everybody in Waterloo, and now our kids are graduating, and she's saying, I know what to do here. Let's do the next thing. And where's that local college algebra teacher that you would entrust your 17, 18-year-old with to say, instead of senior high school algebra, can you tutor freshman college algebra? Do the next thing, right? And now beginning to build up federations here in Texas. We're doing this by building up the Texas, the North Texas Federation of Christian Community College and Trade Schools. We have 40 that are starting now, which is now expanding to the Texas Federation of Christian Community College and Trade Schools. And Texas Homeschool Coalition came in and said, here's 500 co-ops with over 1,000 kids in each. Why don't you build on top of these? So it's interesting to see how Christ's body can now come together and not just be individualized and isolated. Now, we have the absolute best network in the world if we would just get out of our own way and let the Spirit work. California, everybody said, go anywhere, but don't go to California. It'll never work. Never work in California. It's behind the Iron Curtain. Riverside Community College in Southern Cal has 1.2 million students in the community college. That's such a big number, we have a hard time wrapping our mind. 1.2 million kids in a non-regionally credentialed community college network that is the most godless cesspool in the state of California. And all of the people who were still there, landed German Baptist families who refuse to get their kids into debt. They have to send their kids to Riverside Community College. Do you think that we can go and serve them with a Christ-centered, non-debt, locally implemented higher education system? They take our arms. We've had 500 requests from California last year to start Christian halls. Who's going to lead it? Because it's a community problem. It's not something I can solve. So to close, I would simply say, what's our goal? Our goal is a Christ-centered, non-debt, non-government-controlled education system that de-atrophies our God-given abilities to form souls, high school and beyond. That's what we're trying to do. And we're seeking to redefine this as community-based human formation. And I just want to ask you, where do you see God having gifted you to retake this in Canada? Is it the advocacy space? Is it the speaking? Guys like Bruce who can get up and just tell an unbelievable story and call people in to action. That's why we built, in our model, the Christian Halls International thing, because somebody needs to go out there and share the vision. But we can share the vision till the cows come home, but unless somebody actually goes and builds a Christian hall, or if somebody's not willing to be our asymmetrical warfare Delta Force group that's out there community by community by community saying, you can build this, we can help. Maybe you're a really, really good teacher with great content. We need better teachers. We need better professors. So I would just simply say this is an example, a model of a human formational ecosystem that is proven, it's viable, and it's nothing more than turning back to the old ways. There's nothing novel about this. Nothing at all. We're just relearning how to walk. Thank you. It's good to spend time with you.